Episode 88 of the Fired Coaches podcast. We have Coach Rick Pietri with us. Rick recently retired on the last few months here from Jacksonville State, where he was the women's basketball coach for 13 seasons. Prior to that, he was at South Alabama, which is his alma mater, where he was the women's basketball coach. He was there for 13 seasons as well. He's been a high school guy, led high school programs to state championships. He's been an assistant at the college level on the men's side at Spring Hill, Birmingham Southern. Was a manager back in the mid-'80s at South Alabama on the men's team. So Coach Rick Pietri, can't really appreciate you enough. Coming off of retirement here, you probably could be doing a lot of other things other than hanging out on the Fired Coaches podcast. So thanks for sitting down.
Happy to be here, Marcus. Really happy to be here.
Yeah. So I guess, again, just doing a little bit of a deep dive on your background and things like that. Obviously being from the New Orleans area, going to South Alabama and the Mobile area to school. What was kind of that interest was part of the decision going to South Alabama, being a part of the men's basketball program as like a manager and helping out? Was that kind of what led you there, or was it another decision?
No, that had everything to do with it. So Marcus, I went to De La Salle High School in New Orleans, which at the time that I went there, we had 1,000 boys. By the time I was a sophomore, I realized we had a very talented class. I was not good enough to compete with those guys, but I loved the game, loved the sport, wanted to be around it. And so I became a manager my sophomore year. And because I just wanted to still be around it, even if I wasn't going to play. And actually ended up being, one of the best things could have ever happened to me, because in my 3 years as a manager in high school, the coaching staff trusted me completely. The players trusted me completely. And so I would get perspectives from each side that if I were a player only, I would have never gotten. The coaches talked with me about the players. I would share info from the players without, violating confidence to the coaches, because I wanted to protect the players and also help the coaches understand what they were dealing with. And so my senior year, one of the assistant coaches said, you can get a scholarship for being a manager, right? I had no idea, had none. And so being from New Orleans, I didn't want to stay at home for college, but also didn't want to go too far. And Mobile is just a 2-hour and change ride down I-10. And so I sent some letters to a couple schools. I didn't want to go to LSU because it's too big and it intimidated me. So South Alabama is the only one that responded. I sent a letter, asking about being a manager. They responded. And so I decided to go to South Alabama to continue to be a part of basketball because I loved it so much. And again, same thing happened for me at South Alabama. Those 4 years there, I had the complete trust of the players over time, the complete trust of the coaching staff. Cliff Ellis was the head coach my freshman year. He left to go to Clemson, and the guy named Mike Hanks took over the next 3 years. But I was very close with the coaching staff, but close with the players too. And so again, I had access to information as a manager that I would have never had as a player, in terms of perspectives and the whys the coaches were doing, what they were doing, and so forth. And so literally that's what led me right into coaching. It's just my senior year at South, I was like, what am I going to do next October 15th? Of course, that was the date back then. Mm-hmm. Not rolling out basketballs. And so a guy named Steve Hawkins, who was my roommate, who went on to be the head men's coach at Western Michigan, he was my college roommate. He said, Rick, you should coach. And so because I was in school, I was a communications major. I was want to go into broadcasting. And so my first professional opportunity was coaching at St. Paul's Catholic High School in Covington, Louisiana. It was the first job I had, and that led me into a 39-year career in professional coaching.
So going back to high school, was that your upbringing, or were you just mature mature more than most? Because I think like you understanding like, hey, I can feed some information from a player to a coach, or maybe even the other way a little bit, understanding there's still some lines that I can't cross. And I think like most kids at 15, 16, 17 years old, there's no way they'd be able to figure that out, or at least like, be able to do that professionally.
It really, it was important to me when I talked with the coaches about the players that they understood, Coach, I'm going to share this with you, but you can't let on to know that I gave you this information. Otherwise, I'll never get anything from them again.
Yeah.
And so
those are your players at the time, right? I mean, you're really putting yourself on an island.
I went to lunch. I went to cafeteria with these guys. I hung out with these guys. And then the flip side was true. They trusted me enough to say things to me that they would not want the coaches to hear. And so, but when I felt like it could affect our team in a negative way, some of the feelings that they had, then I would say, listen, Coach, you need to know this, because I think that if you can find a way to address it without coming head on, I think it can help our team. And so for me, it was I just wanted to win. Even though I wasn't good enough to play, I still am a hyper competitive person, and I just wanted to win, and I just wanted to give our team the best chance to win. And so that was what was important to me. I wasn't trying to tell on anybody. I was trying to help us get better. And to this day, I don't think any of the players have any idea about some of the things that I may have shared with the coaches about their perspectives on things.
Well, and to me, your emotional intelligence had to be quite high, right? Where you could probably figure out, like, that guy's maybe not doing so well. Maybe I should go ask him some stuff, which actually might be able to help the coach, which I think is still to this day a huge underrated characteristic. I mean, either you have that or you don't. In that first season you were talking about, or going to South Alabama, you talked about Cliff Ellis, Mike Hanks. That first season you're there, I think you guys were 22-8. So you had a great experience in year one. Like you said, Steve Hawkins being your roommate. Just talk about, going through that first year and being like, holy cow, this is college basketball and we're winning.
Well, it was, first of all, the environment was so different. I went to a private Catholic high school, and now I'm at a school, a university with a team that has guys coming from all kinds of backgrounds. And so I had to adjust to managing that. Their personalities, because a lot of their personalities didn't match anything that I had dealt with in high school. But I like to think of myself as adaptable, and I did adapt. That being said, we had some super talented guys. Terry Catledge went on to be a first-round draft pick in the NBA, played for the Sixers and the Bullets at the time, now the Wizards. We had a guy named Dexter Schaus, who was a guard, who went on to get a contract with the Lakers. Kelly Blaine was drafted. We had some super hyper-talented guys. And as a result, we beat Charles Barkley's Auburn team my freshman year. They had Barkley and Chuck Person. We beat those guys. We beat in the NIT, we beat Florida, and they had Vernon Maxwell and Rob Williams. So those guys were good. And then we lost in the second round of Virginia Tech in the NIT to Del Curry, Steph's dad. So I had a great experience in terms of managing and watching the coaches manage the talent we had. And of course, this is a different situation because you got guys who all think that they should be the guy. You know what I'm saying? Right. And so just watching the coaches manage that was eye-opening for me.
Yeah. After you get done at South Alabama, you get into the high school realm and you end up being an assistant. You spend some time at Spring Hill and Birmingham Southern in the Alabama area as a college coach, as an assistant there, and then you get back into the high school scene on the boys basketball side, and you have a successful run. I believe it was 6 years over 2 different schools. I guess kind of those early years of getting into it from the high school standpoint, but also the college standpoint. I guess we'll start with the college side. Getting to Spring Hill, having success, NAIA tournaments, and then Birmingham Southern. As you were starting to formulate your coaching career, was there an interest of one way or the other through your high school and college experiences of like which way you wanted to go? Or was it just, I'm kind of where my feet are at and we're just going to put in as much as we can to be as successful, and wherever it goes, it goes?
Well, after my second year at St. Paul's in Covington, Louisiana, I decided that I wanted to pursue college. Again, Steve Hawkins, my college roommate, we stayed in contact, and he was pursuing college. And I just decided that that's what I wanted to pursue. While I really enjoyed my high school experience, those 2 years at St. Paul's, I really wanted to try college. And so I was fortunate at Spring Hill. I was able to get an assistant's job there, which was, the competition wasn't great because the pay was zero. So, so it was a great opportunity. Carl Nash was my boss. Carl had been an assistant. His boss had been fired mid-season the previous season. He was named interim. He did a nice job. They retained him. But when they retained him, they cut the assistant's position entirely. And as a small college, as you can imagine, that's something that happens. And so again, it was close in Spring Hills and Mobile where South Alabama was. And so I reached out to him, got a chance. I was getting my master's at South Alabama in secondary education. So if in case I decided to go back to coaching high school, I could do that. Meanwhile, I'm at Spring Hill coaching, and I had 4 tremendous years at Spring Hill working for Carl. And the last 2 were phenomenal years. We won 24 and 22 games, won a tournament championship the third year. That was 92 and 93. We won the regular season outright and a tournament championship. Coaching a tremendous group of guys. That group of guys on that 94 team, they still hang out together all these years later. And so it was a tremendous experience. My boss, Carl Nash, gets an assistant job at Clemson. I hoped at 27 they would give me the job. I didn't get it. I hired a guy named Joe Nyland who did a great job there. Joe didn't retain me for obvious reasons because, he wanted his own guy, which is understandable. So I'm kind of floating out there. And I was fortunate enough that Dwayne Rebold hired me at Birmingham Southern. And so I was able to land. And so Dwayne, who in this business always matters. And Dwayne is a New Orleans guy. I was a New Orleans guy. Dwayne coached at Jesuit High School in New Orleans and had a great run there before he got into college. And Jim Tillett, who is the head coach at Samford and went on to be a head coach. He was my high school coach my senior year. He and Dwayne were friends. And so that helped me get in the door at Birmingham Southern. So I landed, was there a year. But then, my salary at Birmingham Southern that one year was $11,000. That wasn't a lot in 1994. It's not a lot now. And so I was married. We had our first child, just had our first child, and I decided he needed to eat. So I started to pursue high school jobs because I could still coach, but I could eat too.
Yeah.
And so that's when I was fortunate enough. Listen, I interviewed for 10 head high school jobs, and I got the last one. I got the job at BC Rain in Mobile, and it was such a blessing because the BC Rains are on the fringe of the inner city. They'd had success in basketball. They had just been to the state championship game for the first time, graduating 4 senior starters. The head coach left to go to a crosstown rival. I get hired there, and it was just a tremendous experience. We went to 5A on a 6A scale, went to 4 Final Fours, 3 state championship games, won one of them, won at 97, and just a tremendous experience. And I have such affection for that place. St. Paul's Episcopal approached me and an offer I couldn't refuse, and I moved over there. They had never had any success in boys basketball.
Which was still in Mobile, correct?
It's still in Mobile, yeah, so I didn't have to move. And then my second year, we won 26 games. They'd never won 120 before. We won 26 games, won a state playoff game. They had never won a boys basketball state playoff game. And so we had that exceptional success. And then Joe Godfrey, the athletic director of South Alabama, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You want to come try coaching women's basketball?" Because they had had 10 straight years of losing, averaged 8 wins a year in the decade of the 90s. And he just wanted to try something different, go outside the box. Plus, when I was a manager at South Alabama, he was the athletic director my sophomore through senior year. So I had a pre-existing relationship with him. He had watched my success right there in Mobile, both as an assistant at Spring Hill, as a head coach at BC Rain, as a head coach at St. Paul's. He had watched it, and he said, "Listen, I know you've never coached women before, but you've won in completely different environments: Spring Hill, BC Rain, fringe of the inner city, St. Paul's private school. You've been able to be successful in different stratospheres. I think you can do this." And he said, and I wasn't sure because I never coached a female, I never thought of coaching females. But he just said, "Listen, if you can't get it done, you can always go back to coaching high school. You're good at that." and so, but fortunately for me, I got it done. We had the best year in 10 years, my first year, first winning season in 12 years, my second year, and won a share of a Sun Belt Conference West Division crown my third year, and won it outright my fourth year. So fortunately, I did right by Joe taking that chance on me.
Yeah, going back to BC Rain, you said you applied for 10 jobs. You got that job. They were just in the state tournament. Was that a late opening job? And I'm assuming you probably got that later in the summer then, correct?
I was hired in the middle of August. Yeah, that job opened late. Willie Burns had just taken in the state championship game. He got the job at Blunt High School, a crosstown rival, which was his alma mater. So he goes there. That opens the Rain job up. And Willie replaced a guy named Willie Scott, who had been there forever. He had been the coach at Blunt forever. And so that happened late. And so yes, so I got hired, like I said, middle of August. And if I hadn't gotten that job, Lord knows, I might have been a Waffle House manager. Who knows? But
well, hey, there could be worse things. Waffle House isn't too bad. So
no, it's not. It's really not. So anyway, there you go.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. We're going to talk about South Alabama here. What do you love about Mobile? Obviously, spent a lot of time there. The high school experiences you had, obviously Spring Hill. You talked about South Alabama. What makes Mobile great? Because I always wanted to get down there to go to the Senior Bowl down in January and stuff like that. So what's great about Mobile?
Well, a couple of things. For me, it was close to New Orleans. That was one thing. That was important. Secondly, my junior year in college, I met the woman that would be my wife. And she had born and raised Mobile, never lived anywhere else. It's a neat place. It's close to the beach. You're very close to Gulf Shores and Orange Beach, Alabama, and Dauphin Islands. You're very close to the water. You've also got easy access to New Orleans. I grew up a huge New Orleans Saints fan. I would go, drive over to New Orleans to watch the Saints. When the Hornets/Pelicans came, I would take my kids to go see them. It's obviously very warm weather, and it's a cool town. I mean, there's stuff going on there. Plus, you're close to Pensacola in Florida, and you're close to the Pensacola's an hour away, less than an hour. So I loved living there. I really did. I mean, I lived there more than I lived in New Orleans growing up. And so, and however, something happened that made me have to relocate, and that just happens in this business. And so, but I loved Mobile. I loved living there. My kids grew up there, born there, raised there, graduated from high school there, so I loved it.
Yeah, talk again about, you were kind of explaining, the athletic director being like, hey, I think you could do this job, South Alabama women's basketball, like you mentioned, I've never coached females before, don't know what this is about. Talk about, was that, because I think the people would be like, well, you could be a Division I coach, who cares what you're coaching? But I think to somebody who's been in it, and like you said, kind of on a trajectory and career path on the men's or boys side, how difficult of a decision was that for you to go and jump into that?
Well, it was difficult until I talked to my two mentors. I already mentioned Dwayne Rebold, who hired me at Birmingham Southern. I stayed in contact with him, still in contact with him. Jim Tillett, my high school coach, went on to be the head men's coach at Samford University. Those were the two men that I trusted the most, and both of them told me I was an idiot if I didn't take the job. They said, you get to be a Division I head coach. There aren't many of those. He said, I know it's on the women's side, and that's not what you dreamed of or thought of, but you're a Division I coach. This is not a if. This is a you do this. And both men said that to me, and so I was just comfortable. I was good at being a high school boys basketball coach. I loved it. I enjoyed it, and so it's like, okay, I'm going to leave something I love to go for something uncertain, and so that made me a little bit insecure. But both of those men said, no, you're going. You're doing it. And I'm glad they pushed me into it because, it changed the trajectory of my life, literally,
Yeah.
because I spent the next 26 years as a head Division I women's basketball coach.
Well, it's interesting too, because you bring up Samford there, and it kind of mirrors like the Bucky McMillan story, right? Like him being a high school guy and then getting a Samford job now at A&M. So 9 out of your 13 seasons, you have winning seasons. And again, you stepped into a place that hadn't won a winning season in 10 years. You win the West of the Sun Belt, you go to the NITs. I mean, what was it in building that program? And at what point did you feel like, obviously if you can come in and have some success, that's great. But where did you feel like, you're 1, 2, 3, where you're like, hey, like I really can do this, because sometimes it's like, you almost kind of fool yourself. Like, is this real? Am I doing this right? Like at what point did you feel pretty confident in yourself?
So in year one, it was a real feel out year. A guy named Terry Fowler, I hired, who I knew him from Spring Hill. I was assistant men's. He was assistant women's. He wanted to be the head women's. I hired him. He's the only person I knew in women's basketball. So I hired him, and he was great for me just to help me navigate what it's like coaching women. That it is different. It's not the same. And so that first year, I wasn't really myself. I kind of just felt it out. But nonetheless, even in feeling it out, we still had a much more successful year than they'd had in a decade. And part of that is because, a lot of times when you're replacing a program that has been as bad as they had been for the previous 4 years, just bringing sanity to the equation is the most important thing you can do. The coach that I replaced had 13 different assistants in 4 years. And so you can imagine with that kind of instability that this program was unstable. And so, I just brought sanity and stability. I just listen, we've got standards. These standards are going to be met. They're very simple. Be on time, be where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there. Go to class, and work as hard as we ask you to work in practice, and treat other people the way you would want to be treated. Really simple standards, not a litany of rules, really simple standards. But you'd be surprised, lots of people don't want to meet those standards. And so, but the most important thing you have to have is consequences for when they don't. Because if you don't have consequences, they'll just keep doing the behavior they've been doing. And so I just made sure that they had consequences when they stepped out of bounds. And I also made sure that I didn't make the consequences different for one person than another person. They had to understand that everything applied the same to everyone, whether you were the leading scorer on the team or the last player on the bench. The standards were the same for everybody. And so once they understood that the standards were the same, then they could trust me. Okay, if he says it's going to be a certain way, it's actually going to be that way. And so therefore, trust matters, I think, when you're dealing in team sports as much as anything. When you lose trust, you lose everything. And so having the players being able to trust me, trust my word, and then, obviously we tried to coach them up a different way. We ran a different offense than anybody else in that league. We ran 5-out motion that first year. Nobody had played like that in that league. And the Sun Belt was a great women's basketball league at the time. It was ranked 6th out of 31
Wow.
conferences at that time. My first year there, Marcus, we had 6 teams go to the postseason, 2 NCAA, 4 NIT, and that was when the NIT only had 32 teams in women's basketball. So, you had 6 of the top, 60, 96 teams in the country in the Sun Belt. So again, really good league. And so I cut my teeth against some excellent coaches. And so I had to learn how to coach in Division One. But I made the adjustment. The second year we had 17 wins and had a winning season, and went from 5-11 to I think we went 7-9 the next year, and then year 3 again we just kept building on what we were doing, and then year 3 we win 19 games and go to the NIT, and year 4 we win 22 games and go to the NIT again because we were the one seed in the league and got upset in the conference tournament, but we went to the NIT. So it was just building on what we're doing. And once we saw we were winning, because nothing helps buy-in from the players more when they haven't won than you winning some games. So once you win a few games, they're like, wait, this works. Okay. And so
Validation, right?
yes, so once they buy in, then they raise their level because they're sold now. They're not walking on eggshells. No, they're full speed ahead because they now believe in what you're doing and what your system is, which then takes them to a whole nother level.
Yeah, I love what you said about trust because, right, it's so hard to build, but so easy to lose. And I always found it interesting. I coached 4.5 years of women's tennis at the college level. And it's interesting how I always, I was same thing, coaching men, coaching boys, things like that. I never had any experience with females. And I was just astonished at how better they listened, how, much better, like they understood where their feet are as opposed to thinking they're somebody they're not. There were a lot of things that I was like, wow, if somebody told me this years ago, I probably would have chose this path originally. But talk about after 13 years, I mean, again, you had a ton of success there. March of 2013, you get let go. I mean, what are those feelings? Obviously, being your alma mater, you're on the women's side, you build something there as you're talking about, and then, it comes to a halt.
Well, one of the things, and I know, Marcus, you can appreciate this, administrative changes can tend to have create circumstances for existing coaches. So Joe Gottfried, the athletic director that hired me, that trusted me, my last 2 years with him, 08-09, we won back-to-back 20-win seasons, he retired. And so when he retired, new administration came in. And so, and when Joe retired, he gave me a 4-year contract as he was walking out the door. So therefore I had some job security with the new administration. And so, and I had the support of the new administration at the beginning. I did. But, one of the things so the new administration came in after his first year, and he told all the coaches in South Alabama, he said, listen, with the resources we have and the circumstances we have here, every team should finish in the top half of the league. And my teams did that my first 3 years with that administration. But after my 3rd year, the administration came to me and said, listen, Rick, you're in the top half of the league, but you're in the bottom half of the top half. And so what can we do to get to the top third of the league? Again, the Sun Belt's a great league. Rick Ensel, Middle Tennessee, Joe Foley, Arkansas, Little Rock, Eric Johnson at Denver. It was a great league. And so I was like, listen, we're trying our guts out. Mobile is not a mecca for girls basketball. South Alabama is not a mecca for girls basketball. The Gulf Coast is not. So we had to reach outside of our comfort zone to get talent. And so we had to steal people from other people's backyards and to be competitive. And so going into my last year, which was my contract year, I knew based on that conversation that, if I didn't, reach certain levels of expectation, I wasn't going to get retained. And so, and by the way, that was unnerving because I didn't think I was doing a bad job. We went 17-13 each of those years I mentioned, 500 or better in the league. So my last year, we got up to a solid start, lost a couple, got into conference, got a slow start in conference, and I could just sense that, the administration wasn't happy. And I saw the handwriting on the wall, and it affected me. And so we started playing worse. And I think it was because I was pressing. And so I then had to come to grips with, I got to let go. You know what? it doesn't matter at this point how the season ends. I just got to let go. And when I let go and just coached, we started winning games. And so, we ended up with a terrible start, but we ended up finishing. It was a 20-game season. We finished 10-10 after starting. I think we started 3-6, and we finished 10-10. We won 4 of our last 5 to get to 10-10. And 17, we're 17-12 going to the conference tournament. We lose the opening round of the conference tournament, and then the next week they cut me loose. And so, so you're 17-13 the last 3 years, go 500 or better each of those years. In Division I, you think, okay, that's good enough. I realize we got to make a run. I get that, but I didn't think it was worthy of being cut loose. And from a personal standpoint, it bothered me because I had one son who was playing as a freshman at Spring Hill College in Mobile. My other son was just finishing his junior in high school. And so now I just get fired, and I'm fired right after his junior year. So that really, from a personal standpoint, gutted me. But but listen, most of us in our profession have to live with this. This is, the saying, there's 2 kinds of coaches, those that have been fired, those that will be. And it's true. Now, there are a select few of us that get to escape it. There are a select few that live charmed lives and never get fired in the coaching business. But a lot of us have to live this. And so then how do you recover? That's the question. How do you recover?
Yeah. And, it's interesting. I've shared this on other episodes too. Dusty May, Dan Hurley have been on staffs that have been fired. Nick Saban's been fired when he was an assistant years ago. Bill Belichick's been fired. And it's like, the Coach K's, there's so few, as you mentioned, right? Like there's some that escape it. And again, at the end of the day, like it doesn't define you. But again, right, you put everything into it, right? Like you said, you're having success and you're like, yeah, I understand we got to make a run here, but it's not like, we're winning 3 games or we're winning 3 games in league or anything like that. And I can imagine, with your son going into his senior year, like, do I sit out a year? If I sit out a year, do I get back into it? Right. All the things that you're kind of going through. So, how did you kind of process that with, the opportunity? Obviously, Jacksonville State came about, which was perfect, but like, what kind of went in that as a family for you guys?
Well, it was, the thing was, because I had one son in Spring Hill College on a very small athletic scholarship, so I was paying a lot of money. My other son at St. Paul's Episcopal School, which was where I had coached, which again was a private school. I was paying money for that. I needed a job, so I needed to find a job. And so I had a friend, Patrick Harrington at the time was the women's coach at Northwest Florida Community College, who has since passed. But Patrick was a guy, we were close friends. He had been fired before. He knew I had never been fired before. And so he was great for me because he would check in with me regularly. And, so at first there's a shock. You get a bunch of phone calls. I mean, I'm a head Division I coach for 13 years. I get a bunch of phone calls from people concerned about me. Coach, can't believe it, so on and so forth. But then the reality sets in. What am I going to do? And,
and I don't want to jump in and cut you off here, but, and again, I hate even comparing this, but, some people have said on here before, it's kind of like a death in some ways where everybody reaches out to you right away, right? And then all of a sudden it goes crickets, right?
Crickets, absolutely. And that's why I appreciated Patrick so much, because he stayed in contact with me regularly. And he was like, hey, what about what Coastal Carolina just opened? What about that one? Lamar just opened. What about that one? Let's Texas Pan American just opened. What about that one? Who can you call? Who can you have call for you? He was literally looking out for me.
That's awesome.
And so one of the things he told me when he went through it, he said, listen, get up every morning, shower just like you're going to work, start writing letters. He said, then about lunchtime, if you want to go work out, do that. At night you can hang out with your wife but approach each day like a work day, even though you don't have a job.
Keep that routine.
And exactly. And I was fortunate that I was paid through the end of July. So through the end of June. So at least I had a paycheck coming at least for the next several months. So I was fortunate in that way. And so, you can appreciate this. You cast nets out there, you get some nibbles, but then you don't get it. You get some nibbles, you don't get it. And so that now we're into, we're not at anything, I interviewed for a couple of things, didn't get them. And so I'm getting a little bit unnerved. And then the Jacksonville State job opened June 1. And so
something with you and late jobs in the summer.
I'm telling you. And so I immediately reached out. So a guy named Joe Dean Jr. was the athletic director at Birmingham Southern. He had been prior head coach at Central Florida, and his dad, Joe Dean Sr., had been the athletic director at LSU for many years. And I reached out, and Joe Dean was a basketball guy, and I said, "Do you know anybody at Jacksonville State?" And I had a great relationship. I'd worked his camps. He had a camp called Dixie Basketball Camp in Summit, Mississippi's the world famous Dixie Basketball Camp and Country Club in Summit, Mississippi. And so I had a great relationship with him. He calls the AD at Jacksonville State, a guy named Moose Kogel, who's a football guy. Moose played in the NFL for the Raiders, and he knew Moose because Birmingham Southern had been Division I. They'd stepped down to D3. They were D1 in the Big South. Well, Moose was AD at Coastal Carolina at the time, so they had developed a relationship. So when I called Joe goes, "I know Moose. I'm calling him right now." And so he reaches out to him. Something else fortuitous, the defensive coordinator of the football team at South Alabama, a guy named Bill Clark, he had just gotten the head football job at Jacksonville State.
Is that Bill Clark, who was at UAB for a while then too?
Exactly. And so I was acquainted with Coach Clark. We weren't buddies or friends, but we would bump into each other in the weight room and speak. So I reached out to him. I reached out to Joe Gottfried, my mentor who had hired me at South Alabama, who is now retired. He said, "You need to call Bill. Bill can help get you that job." So Bill talks on my behalf. Coach Dean talks on my behalf, and then I end up interviewing and getting the job. And just the stars align. And so much of our business is, if you don't know somebody, do you know somebody who knows somebody? And so much of our business is based on the relationships you've developed over the course of your career. And that's why it's so important to cultivate those, because they matter, and it helps get you employed, And so now, I had to go ace the interview. I had to go on the interview and ace it and prove to them that I was worthy. I wasn't the only person interviewed for the job, but I aced the interview and was chosen, and partially chosen because I'd had the success I'd had, and I was inheriting a program that had gone 1-27 the year before and 4-25 the year before that, and had 8 straight losing seasons. And so I'll never forget, I bumped into a supporter of the program. I went to see Coach Clark's team practice because I was up there by myself. So that year, going back to my family, my son wanted to play with his team his senior year. So he and my wife stayed in Mobile while I was in Jacksonville, which is 4 hours and 45 minutes away. So while I was up there, I didn't have any family time. So I went and watched football team practice as a supporter of the program, and he was introduced to me, and he said, "So you were at South Alabama, huh? So why'd you come here?" I said, "Well, I'm going to be honest, I got fired." I said, "We went 17-13 each of my last 3 years, but that wasn't good enough." He looked at me and said, "You go 17-13 here, we'll name a street after you." And so anyhow, so my first year, similar to South Alabama, I take over 1-27, and I had 11. I get hired third week of June, so it's too late to add anybody. And so we had 11 kids, 5 juniors who had lived through 5 wins and 52 losses. And and so the first thing I had to do is, again, just like I talked about in South Alabama, I had to develop trust with them. I'd been through it before, so I knew I could do it. I'd built a program at South Alabama, so I knew I could do it. And I told that to the kids, "Listen, I've done this before. Just trust me." And so, but I had to bring sanity to the equation. There was some insane.
Start it all over, right? Like you did at South Alabama.
Exactly. I had to start all over. With the expectations, the standards, what you have to do. I'll never forget the athletic academic support. A person said to me at Jacksonville State after I'd gotten the job, Coach Pietri, because women's basketball, the worst team GPA of any sport on campus as well. And she said to me, "Coach, what can we do to get women's basketball players to go to class?" I told her, I said, "Janet, I'll handle that. You don't even have to worry about that. That's going to be handled immediately." And so, but those kids had to understand there were consequences that didn't go. And I'm a team guy. So, for those kinds of things, if somebody doesn't go to class, the whole team pays. I'm a big believer in social responsibility. And so, when the team had consequences for somebody missing class, and then more than once, and then another time this guy's telling the truth. Like, if we don't go to class, he's going to penalize us. And so, well, guess what? We started going to class, and in 2 years, 2 years later, we had a top 25 GPA in NCAA Division I.
Wow.
And so, so it's just, the fact that standards are going to be set, and we're going to require you to meet them. It's not just for show. These are expectations, and you have to meet them. And if you don't, there's going to be consequences, whether it be going to class, treating people the way you're supposed to be treated, working hard in practice. There's expectations for that too. Just do what we ask you to do, and you will have no problems. And so just like it happened in South Alabama, we started playing. We didn't win a lot early, but we started playing better. Well, then all of a sudden we started winning games. And again, once we started winning games, they really bought in. And then we went 8-8 in the conference after they'd gone 1-15 the previous 2 years. And with kids that had gone 4-25 and 1-27. So and I was blessed enough to be named OVC Coach of the Year for that turnaround.
You guys went semifinals of the conference tournament that year too,
and
right?
We did, and we got to the semifinals of the conference tournament as well. So, and it was all because those kids bought in. They were like, "Oh, he says what he means. If he says it, it's going to happen. I can trust that. So I can trust him." And and then all of a sudden, basketball-wise, we start having some success. And then we start. So it snowballed. We were 0-4 in the league. We went 8-4 in our last 12. And then we went 2-1 in the conference tournament. So, and then the next year we won 19. We beat Alabama at Alabama, first Power 5 win on the road in the history of the program, and we win 19 games. So again, we had done it at South with expectations, standards. This is what you have to meet. There will be consequences if you don't, and they're going to be fair consequences for everybody. I'm not going to make a different consequence for one person than another person. Everybody's got to meet the same standard, and when they could trust that and trust me, then there's a comfort that comes with that. And then once they realize that it could yield wins, then there's a buy-in, a complete buy-in, and then I got the best out of every kid.
I think when you explain that, right, the way you did to the kids of like, hey, I don't care if you're number 12 or you're the best player, I'm going to treat you all the same. In terms of, fairness, in terms of rules and all that. And then when you follow through with that, I feel like that's the best way, right? Because I feel like there's so many coaches where it's like, well, I'd rather not talk about it because we run into an issue and it's, this person's got to sit, but they're our best player. It's like, no, like you just have rules and standards and that's how people follow it. And also love going back to what you're talking about with Coach Clark, having a football guy talk to a football guy, football coach to an AD. I feel like sometimes it's like, well, I know this person, but they may not speak the same language because the backgrounds might not match up, right? Where it's like, if I can get somebody that understands football to football and they're like vouching for this guy in the basketball world, that actually might be better than a basketball guy talking to a football AD, right?
Absolutely.
Just talk about, I guess, turning around programs and seeing that buy-in. I mean, maybe you did. I don't know if we got Pietri Lane down in Jacksonville, Alabama, like the donor said. I don't know if he got you a street, but just talk about like, whether it was South Alabama or Jacksonville State, and taking programs that had not seen any type of success in decades to where you start building that, and all of a sudden you just see the support, from the campus community, the community in general, just people buying in.
Well, it was great. And particularly at Jacksonville State, they were so hungry because they'd been really bad in that situation. Same at South. And so the support from the community was great. We had really good camps as a result of it in the summertime. And so having the faith and the belief of administrations, you don't get to be somewhere in Division I for 13 years unless somebody appreciates what you're doing, and so, and that happened in both places. So I was grateful for the community buy-in and the community belief and the community support. And, just grateful that, I got to experience that, and that I got to have the kind of support that I got in both places.
Yeah. 9 out of your 13 seasons, you're 500 in league play. You've seen the WNIT. I guess, being at Jacksonville State, I think you're in 3 different leagues. Ohio Valley, ASUN, Conference USA. What was that like, as the conference shuffling has gone on over the years? What was that like preparing for different opponents and just jumping around like that?
It was rough from the standpoint of just acclimation. We were in the Ohio Valley for my first, I believe it was 8 or 9, and then 2 years in the ASUN. Now, the first year we're in the ASUN, we win the ASUN West Division. The first year, we were 13-3. We win the ASUN West. We go to the championship game. We play Florida Gulf Coast at Florida Gulf Coast. It's Carl Zemesco, who's now the coach of the Atlanta Dream, who's a great coach.
Yeah, they always had a great program there on the women's side.
Yeah, and he's great. But again, in that situation, we had 3 losses. They came to our place and blew us out. They won. They only had 1 league loss. We go to their place for the conference championship game. The place is sold out. I'd never coached in front of a sold out crowd before. That wasn't an education day. So literally, it's a sold out gym, and and they had beaten us 25 or so at our place. We're up at halftime in a conference championship game. Now we did. They had a WNBA player and they pulled away in the fourth quarter. We're down 4 at the end of 3, so we're still right there. But it was a great experience for us, and and so our kids got rings for winning the ASUN West Division and go to the NIT. We went to that's the first postseason Jacksonville State in Division I had ever had, and so that was a great year for us. Moving from the ASUN to CUSA, now that was a jump, because you're talking about the OVC averaged the best year we ever had in the OVC ranking wise was 16, our last. The worst was 29. We averaged somewhere in the mid to upper 20s. Our 2 years in the ASUN, we were 21 and 22. Our first year, we're in the CUSA, we're 12. That's a radical change. And so it was, and we were hit hard by graduation too, and matriculation. So we had to create a whole new roster. And so that was rough. So the first year was rough, but we settled in and went 7-9 in conference play. The second year was my worst year in the profession. We went 10-20 and 4-14 in the league, lost 10 of our last 12. And I literally almost thought about retiring after that because it was the most miserable I'd ever been. That team at the end of the year quit on me, and it was hard to stomach. But I was talked out of retirement by 2 close friends and said, "Listen, you've done too much. You've done too much you deserve to go out better than this. You deserve to have a good year." And then this past year, we went 16-16, 9-9. So it was a marked improvement from the previous year. And so it just a much better taste in my mouth going out. But it was time, 26 years as Division I head coach, 39 years in the profession. Here's how I'm fortunate, Marcus. Most college coaches don't get this. I've been in the Alabama retirement system for 31 years because my years at BC Rain counted. And now my private school years at St. Paul's, Spring Hill, and Birmingham Southern did not count. But I had 31 years, 33 with sick leave. So I've got a retirement benefit. I'm going to be fine. Nobody has to worry about me. Most coaches don't get that. Most college coaches don't get 31 years in a state retirement system that takes care of you when you're done like that. And so I'm very fortunate that at 61, I just turned 61 a few days ago, that at 61 years old, I don't have to worry about money. I'll be okay.
Yeah, well, happy birthday to you. And you deserve that too, right? I mean, that's great that you're getting taken care of that way, but you put your time in. As we started the episode here, obviously, yeah, you retired May 1st, you told me, was your first true retirement day. I guess talk about, kind of the family sacrifices. You're talking about the jump from obviously South Alabama, things are ending there, your kid's in high school there as going to his senior year. Just talk about like what your family has given as while you've been doing the basketball stuff.
Well, they've sacrificed so much. I mean, I missed so many of both of my kids' games, because they're basketball players and I coach basketball, so a lot of time when they're playing, I'm not around, I'm on the road, so I missed so many of their games, which was rough for me. And then my younger son, I missed his entire senior year. I got to see him play one game his senior year, and that was their state playoff. His team won a playoff game. No St. Paul's team had won a playoff game since my team in 2000 won a playoff game, and this is 2014. So his team won a playoff game, so I drove down to Dothan. Fortunately, I had a space where I could get down there and go watch him play. But that was it. I got to see him play one time his senior year. And I missed so much. And it was, not having a dad in the house your senior year, that's not easy, and it was rough on my wife because the two of them, I mean, they had to manage each other and it didn't always go well.
You get sick of each other a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm 4 hours and 45-minute drive away, and I can't just leave, I got a team, I got a coach, I got a job I got to do. And so for me, that was the hardest thing for me. Was that 1 year of sacrifice of, because listen, I didn't want to, he wanted to play with his teammates. He'd played with, I didn't want to relocate him. And so, but nonetheless, it was a rough year and it was a rough year for our family. And it was a rough year for me personally. Professionally, it was great because we were having that first year at Jacksonville State went so well. So professionally, it was great. But personally, it was really rough. And those are some of the sacrifices, unfortunately, in our business that we have to make because, as you know, when you change jobs in our business, most of the time it involves relocation. Now, it didn't for me going from BC Rain to St. Paul's or from St. Paul's to South Alabama. That's so rare
Yeah.
that you make 2 job changes and you never have to move. But most of the time in our business, when you got to move, you got to relocate, and that can be real tough on a family. It was tough on mine.
Did you ever think of, going back to BC Reigns and St. Paul and doing the boys' side, and obviously you'd been a college assistant on the men's side. Did you ever think of like, I wonder if I could look at a men's job? Or was it, hey, I'm all in on South Alabama and that was going well, and now I'm just going to stick on the women's side?
Once you're on the women's side, it's almost like, from a men's basketball perspective, it's almost like you're in an alternate universe.
Like a foreign language.
It is. And so, and then particularly once you're in it, so once I'm in on the women's side for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, the recruiting contacts you had, everything changes in that cycle. So now, I'm not going to get a head Division I job on the men's side from being a women's coach. So I'm going to have to go be somebody's assistant, and I might have to create a whole new network because while, yes, there were still people that I could connect with on the men, the long-time veteran, but a lot of changes over that time. And so the deeper you get into it, the further away you get from the men's side, it's not realistic to go back. So I did not have a burning desire to go back, but but the fight to get back to what I had, because I loved being a head coach. I got my first head coaching job at 29 and never looked back. I was a head coach from 29 to 60, and so being a head coach is nothing like it. And so I didn't want to go back and be an assistant. So I was comfortable doing what I was doing. Now, I always thought, well, maybe someday, because the most fun I ever had in coaching was coaching high school boys. That was the most fun. So I thought about, would I ever want to go back and do that? But, I've got some personal circumstances that create some challenges. And while I could be a support for somebody, maybe in some way, shape, or form, I'm done chasing wins. I chased wins for, 32 years as a head coach. I'm just done chasing them. I've had enough. And I still have something to offer, but yeah, I've had enough.
If you could give yourself at Spring Hill a piece or two of advice looking back now, what would it be?
Looking back in my Spring Hill experience, I would say that I was naive enough to think that I could get that job and be a head coach there. In my mind, I was going to be the head coach at Spring Hill for 30 years. But that understanding that, in this business, we are not in control. We do not get to choose where we work. Somebody has to choose us. And so just understanding that you don't get to say, I'm going to get this job, because somebody has to pick you. And so this is a profession that somebody has to pick you, and you have to be comfortable with the fact that you're going to have to lean on other people and find ways to get other people to pick you. And so that would be the biggest thing, because when I didn't get that Spring Hill job, I was literally heartbroken. To me, that was the be all and end all. That's what I wanted.
That was coaching Duke, right? For you.
Exactly. For me, that's what it was. And when I didn't get it, I was literally just gutted. And so and I was so fortunate that Jim Tillett reached out to Dwayne Reboel when he had an opening and said, listen, what about Rick Pietri? And then because that 1 year working for Coach Reboel, because that was for professional development, because Coach Reboel coached Bucky McMillan, by the way, at Birmingham Southern. And that 1 year in my professional development took me leaps and bounds.
Wow. I guess to finish up, what are you most excited to look forward to outside of the hoops world and retirement now?
Well, one of the things I told you, my degree was in communications with an emphasis in broadcasting. So Jacksonville State has invited me to do the color on the broadcast for their ESPN Plus games. So I'm looking forward to that.
You finally get to use that degree.
Exactly. It took a minute. So I'm looking forward to that. And I'm also, I've considered, again, being a resource for maybe a boys' high school program, not coaching it. I don't want to be the head coach. I don't even want to be a true assistant. Just maybe, just a consultant, just somebody to be on the side, to be a support for the kids. Again, I'm not about chasing wins, and I don't want anybody's job, but just some way to stay connected. I haven't pushed any buttons on that yet, because, I've only been retired a short period, But maybe by August, I might reach out to some programs here locally to see about, maybe being a consultant or being somebody because I've got a lot of knowledge I think that I could impart that could help some people. And, and as long as they're comfortable, listen, because I can appreciate, you walk in, some guy who's got over 400 Division I wins walks into a program and, oh my gosh, he's going to want my job. No, I don't want your job, and I just want to help. And, because I still love coaching and I love being around kids, and I love being an example, trying to set an example. Because truly, just winning wasn't enough for me. I wanted to be able to help kids understand what the real world was going to be like once basketball was over. And I wanted them to understand what it was that they needed to be prepared for and and how they needed to conduct themselves. And the reason we have the standards we have here is because they apply to what happens when you're finished. And so that part was really important to me too.
No, I love to hear that. I do think you have a lot of knowledge to give back. And yeah, in a consulting role where it's like less stressful, here's my advice, take it or leave it. Could be a really good thing too. Well, Coach Pietri, I appreciate you sitting down. I mean, honestly, love hearing your story here. Hope you enjoy some retirement time. And again, just thanks for taking some time on the pod.
Absolutely, Marcus. Happy to be with you.